Now all eyes are glued here in the control van to see Ituna come out of the green here. We'll listen in as we get our first look.
Here she is, coming up.
Looks like I'm kind of midships on this, according to the sonar.
Nice and murky.
Yeah, very, very murky.
Okay, here you go. Here's Ituna.
Can you identify that structure?
I'm going to come up and find the top of the wreck.
Okay. I'll follow you up. That you're kind of
one of the features that we noted last year when we were diving and we didn't have the same field of vision was how much of Ituna's hull has started to fall away. There you see the superstructure just above. See that round? That, I believe, is what's left of the mount on top of the house for the stack. Deck.
Oh, yeah, I mean, that's 4.
So we're looking down at decking here. So people are wondering about Ituna. The Ituna was built as a luxury yacht in 1886 in Scotland, and she was built by the A.J. and Ingalls shipyard in Glasgow, and built for John G. Mackey of Valkyrie House, Auchencairn, Castle Douglas, when she was launched on April 21st, 1886.
Kind of outline the ship.
Ituna is the old Latin name for the Solway Firth, where she first kissed the water. She had several owners before passing to American Allison Armour, a wealthy socialite and yachtsman who was interested in natural sciences. She sailed from New York in December 1894 for Havana and Atlantic ports of Mexico for a scientific research expedition, and in that also sailed down to the Yucatan, to Chiapas, and Oaxaca. We like to joke and say we are at the bow. We like to joke and say that she helped chart a very rare and unknown region at the time. At least it was known to the locals, but not so much to the rest of the world. Today we call that place Cancun. Anyway, one of the features that we see here coming up on the bow is it's got this nice, beautiful formed bow, much like that of a sailing ship. In terms of the form of vessel you see here, this is a period in which sail is gradually giving way to steam. That wonderful billet head that you see, that prow coming up, would have supported a bowsprit in her day. That, of course, is now gone, but the mount is still in place. And this form, these lines, really speak to her origins, not only as a luxury-built ship, but as an epitome of Scottish shipbuilding. The Scots built some of the finest ships in the world, and indeed, at the same time that this vessel was slipping down the ways, another vessel, born in a Scottish shipyard, Balaclutha, would also be launched, and today, after a long and storied career, she's one of the premier exhibits at San Francisco Maritime National Historical Park at Hyde Street Pier. And for those of you who know that vessel, as you look at the bow of Ituna, I think you can see the relationship, these two products of a Scottish yard. So we're looking down now into the bow, and what you see as we start to move aft, and John, let's just drive down the center line slow and careful. You see the windlass used for handling, raising and lowering the anchor just immediately aft here of this bulkhead line. There it is, just coming up. It's that clipper bow that actually helped us identify Ituna last year. With luck, the small little ROV actually landed right in front of that. And so characteristic that it's like, yep, that's got to be Ituna.
Ashley, what types of rockfish are you seeing here? Or Josh? Or Jen?
Yellowtail. copper.
Are those perch or also, or are those all rock?
Those are rockfish, the ones with the yellow tails and the little spots on the back. So yellowtails. Just a line there. I'm just kind of up high above that line that's just running under the sub right now.
Ituna sank with a cargo of cement and machinery on board.
And Ituna also sank with 2 men. And I believe, from what we've been told, that joining us tonight for this dive is Mr. Warren Galvin. Mr. Galvin never knew his uncle, George Nevin. George had been dead 7 years when Mr. Galvin was born in San Francisco's Richmond district, my old neighborhood, Mr. Galvin. But I understand that all your life you'd heard family stories about your uncle's loss at sea in 1920 on Ituna, and had looked at photos of this man, wondering about him. We have an account from a reporter that interviewed Mr. Galvin, who says that the discovery last year
what are you looking for there?
Sparked some real strong response, and it's an emotion, a sense of nostalgia for Mr. Galvin. When Bob Schwemmer rang him up and said he'd like to talk to him about George and what had happened 95 years earlier. It felt that it was unbelievable. Back here on one of the science computers, we have an image up of the original San Francisco Chronicle account of the sinking, but also superimposed over this a picture of George Nevin and a picture of his nephew Warren Galvin. Is it possible to put that up on screen?
It is.
Josh, can you look down?
Yep, I can. Catch the bit of the front of the sub, but
okay. So we're looking down into the forward hold area. This would have been, in the fishing days, more of hold space. In yacht days, this, of course, was a much nicer and better appointed space. But you can see through the years as the wooden superstructure and decks have collapsed in, filling the inside of Ituna up with what was once above. That area has become more of a repository as well as a haven for fish.
There are lingcod. There are also rockfish here. Yellowtail rockfish are the brown ones with the yellow dots on them, and we also have copper rockfish and likely some other types. We have scientists ashore. If you have another fish ID for us, do send it in.
You can see some of the deck beams have come down here. Event, a ship becomes a shipwreck, but how over time it becomes one with the environment. So here what's happened is the rivets have started to fail. You see that double pattern of riveting that's common with ships of the time with this type of construction, the strakes of iron being fitted, sometimes in later ships steel as well, being fitted over the frames or the ribs. Can you zoom in on that, please?
On the hull?
On the hull where the plate has come off?
Sure.
Where the fresh rust is.
Okay. Let's step in a little bit here. Okay, we can zoom in. It's good.
So here you see, it's a good example of that once fine, it was a beautiful shipbuilding, how these vessels were constructed with rivets, hot rivets, bucketed in, driven, peened over, and then made flush. Watertight seams with a little bit of iron filing put in between to make a rust joint, primed and painted, and sent on her way. We can zoom out again.
Zoom out, please.
And can you just take another look at the plate on the bottom for me, please, and let's get a capture?
Do we have a sense of scale? I don't see the lasers on.
It's going to be about a 2 by 6 foot piece of plate, as I recollect, thereabouts.
The lasers
Thank
are
you,
on.
Jim.
There you see a little bit of the stack structure as well. That's the fitting that would have gone around the stack.
Interesting. We are seeing canary rockfish and yellowtail rockfish. If we have, or copper rockfish, excuse me, if we have some of our rockfish experts on our science chat, please do let us know as you make other IDs.
So the space that we passed when we first dropped in were formerly staterooms and crew berthing. Beautiful. So here again, too, you see more of the structure of the ship. In shipbuilding parlance, those are called frames. Many people on shore call those ribs. And that's fine. Here you see a strake that's come off. You see more of the hull plating that's fallen directly below. That's old. That's old damage. She's just coming to pieces. Going to pieces, I should say. Ituna is slowly becoming one with the marine environment. She's been on the bottom now for 96 years. And in shallower water, ships don't hold together as well as they do in deeper water. So if anybody watched and looked at Independence just a couple of days ago, you saw how much more solid she was. Of course, she hadn't been on the bottom as long as this, but also still painted. So we are at the fantail right now. Can you see that below you, Josh?
Roger that, yeah.
Can you drop? You've got some beams coming out here, eye pokers, as Dr. Ballard calls them. You can see how the framing comes around, and you see right there on the seabed some of that stern structure. Bob Schwemmer, she looks in a little worse shape than when we saw her last year. Do you agree?
For a question about that, yes, we do have Bob Schwimmer connected with us, and another collection of scientists ashore who are here to contribute their expertise. Although they are not with us, they're watching the same feed that you are and can write in their observations and share their stories and contribute to help make this exploration even stronger and to answer some of your questions.
Yeah, I believe I see that we have Russ Matthews is with us.
Hi,
hey, Russ. And I believe Captain Steve Nagowitz, veteran wreck diver, explorer, and historian, is also with us too, and others.
Stephanie Truga is also with us.
Yes,
Gary
Peter
Fabian was with us and stepped out just a minute ago.
Peter Etnoir.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so let's make that move.
Really
he left us.
No, we dove on this.
And that, I mean, what we have is a crisper, darker picture here. Relief certainly is stronger for me than it was before. We had an excellent ROV in the little Seabotics that we had, but it's not Herc. Herc with the camera systems and the fact that I'm looking at this large screen as opposed to in a small screen makes a world of difference. One of the toughest things, you know, when you look at these is, I mean, I know ships, and it just takes a little bit of work. You're gazing at this tangle, and out of this, you're trying to make out the form of the ship that once was. And I see features, I see things. I mean, an awful lot of archaeology, I'll be honest, is called pattern recognition. My colleagues who walk in fields looking at sites of First Nations are looking for fire-cracked rock. They're looking for shaped stone, things that speak to them as they see these patterns on the ground.
And the lingcod, the big gray lingcod.
Yeah.
Let's continue to go along this side.
Roger.
I think we also have some green striped in there. Yellowtail, and I can't tell if it's a black or a widow.
Towards the wreck right now.
So Stephanie,
Okay,
if you can
once
help us
come
out, that'd be
around, then
great.
We'll step Argus probably.
Some sperm bundles.
The one thing you can see is how they're actually outlining below this strake the actual curve of the frame, so the ribs there. Makes it all the more skeletal.
That might have just...
And they're green.
And they're green, which is interesting and different than what we normally see when we're diving in the deep sea, and there are not typically plants at the depths we explore, but here we are at 68 meters. Someone who has control of the newspaper, the computer use station 10, could you click OK or cancel so everyone can see that at home? Awesome, thanks.
So again, here what we see is what ordinarily, you see as the smooth side of a ship is actually made up of strakes that have been curved and bent and then riveted into place. Those rivets hot as they're driven, and then they cool and shrink and help bind it down. But here you can see how the strake here is going, and that's at one area where the hull is bending. They built them good. It would take the power of the sea. And let's bear in mind that this one, she was pounded hard in this gale, and they talked about the bow starting to open up and water coming in. The two casualties, George Nevins in particular, seasick and took to his bunk and was not seen by the others as they abandoned ship.
Jim, could you talk a little bit to what are the rules of shipwrecks when they contain human remains? What are are there memorials placed? What is done for men who are lost at sea?
Well, generally, the sea is our biggest graveyard as a species. I think many lie below there, and as a general rule, we look at shipwrecks in a variety of ways. Some wrecks have very special value where society has set them aside and said, this is a memorial. In some cases, those are war graves. One in particular, of course, is USS Arizona at Pearl Harbor. The USS Conestoga, discovered last year and announced this year, with her 56 crew presumably still in there, or at least having died on her, is considered a memorial as well. This vessel is, as well, the site of the loss of those two men, and as such, should be accorded a certain measure, of respect. What I think, has happened as well here is that Ituna has transitioned in a beautiful way, as others have, as, shall we say, memorials, into becoming an undersea memorial garden in a way, a setting of life, not just death. So here we are coming up on the bow again, and again you see that magnificent clipper bow coming up. You see the stem, that is the very front part, curving up towards that beakhead where the bowsprit once would have been. Just at the top of the frame you see the windlass.
Let's do another 15.
But there it is. That is the typical bow of that amazing structure. So one thing Bob Schwemmers has written in to say that otter trawls are nets that have otter boards fastened to the sides. So when in motion underwater, the boards pull away from each other. That opens the net up in a horizontal direction. And so benthic fisheries as well as pelagic fisheries have been known to apply the technique. Nets were recovered along the beam of the vessel, that is the side for those on land, and in the case of Ituna, along the starboard beam, versus, say, over the stern transom, which is how traditional commercial trawlers work. Here you're getting a very clear sense of what we talk about when we say clipper bow. See how sharp that bow is? It's formed nicely. Right ahead of us, what we're looking at is the billet, or the beak of the ship. Through that aperture in the anemones, the bowsprit would have come out. But here you see again just the shape of that bow and how it has scoured, actually, right to the bottom of the stem. So in this case, the bow is not buried in the mud at all. It actually is clear.
Amazing.